Hello everybody, my name is Boulevard, and welcome to probably one of the more irrelevant tournament tacticians that I've done. The meta really hasn't shifted too much in the last couple of weeks since the release of patch 2.18, and with the Jace Arcane expansion dropping next week, we're not sure how many cards are in it. My guess is that it's going to be a lot closer to the KDA event than something like a champion expansion, so like it shouldn't really shake up the meta too much, but it will be a nice little injection, and of course Jace himself can really upset things because at the moment things are pretty stale. I'm not going to lie to you. There are like three major players that we're going to talk about, and rather than like focus on the tier list, I'm just kind of going to like talk about these major players. So this will be a quick, easy, painless tournament tactician, but I do want to put it out there. I want to get the tournament tier list out because we do have the online league series this weekend, as well as there's a European tournament whose name is escaping me, but I will have a link for the sign up in the description below. So if you want to sign up for the online league series, if you're in the Americas or whatever this European tournament is, that's the name I cannot think of, both of those signups will be in the description below and clearly labeled so that you can still play some Legends of Runeterra this weekend. So we've condensed and consolidated a little bit over here on the Boulevard tier list. First off, let me just get over the major players of the meta. These are like the three most popular decks. These are going to be the three most popular champions: Draven, Scion, Sivir, and then a Gangplank deck. The reason that Plunder and Bandle Pirates have swapped in their tier 1 and tier 2 position is that Plunder beats Bandle Pirates and Sivir Demacia, whereas Bandle Pirates beats Draven, Scion, and I don't even know if it beats Sivir Demacia, if I'm being honest. It might, I'm not 100% sure. But the point is, if you are going to be seeing a lot more Gangplank, then you want to be playing Plunder into that. And then a side effect of this is that all of the Poppy decks have kind of fallen down. And that is mainly because like elusives have been so popular on ladder that the tournament meta, which is normally at least a little impacted by ladder, has warped around that to an extent where like these decks are doing like none of these are getting hosed by elusive rally. In fact, they're doing relatively well into elusive rally, and that means that like the deck just becomes less playable. Bandletree is less playable because it doesn't do very well into Gangplank decks in general because they can't stop the level up, and then Gangplank wipes their board. And of course, the Absolvers in Sivir Demacia make it difficult, and even Scion has started to sort of swing the matchup back in its favor. It's a lot closer to 50-50 than it was on the release of Scion and Bandletree, respectively. And then Ziggs Poppy, it does very well into other Poppy decks, and then with those Poppy decks falling down, then Ziggs Poppy starts to fall down as well. Now, these decks are still good. They're still very fun. You can still win a tournament with them. That's why they're on the tier list. That's what we've consolidated the tier list. There's not as many decks on here. These are the good ones, right? Like everything that I'm talking about has a very express purpose. But Poppy is not really within the top 3 champions that we're expecting to see when we look at a top 8. It's going to be a lot of Scion, a lot of Sivir, and then a lot of Gangplank. And the flavor of Gangplank is really up to you. Again, Plunder, better into Sivir and other Gangplank decks, so like that's why it's up here. And then Darkness and Shellfolk Evolution. You know, you might be looking at me like, Boulevard, what the hell are these doing up here? So I've always been big on Darkness. That's no secret. Darkness and Lee Sin are the 2 decks where I like, they are seasonal decks in the sense that like, there's not an insane amount of ladder games on them. They are difficult to play. They, I guess, are not the most fun for people to play because even the players that can play them aren't like busting these out at every grassroots tournament. But the better you are on the deck, the better you are at flipping bad matchups. And I would expect to see a meteoric rise within Lee Sin and Darkness when it comes to the seasonal rather than the grassroots tournaments. But like, there's no reason for me to move Darkness out of tier 1 when like it is a tier 1 deck, just nobody's playing it. And then Glorious Evolution Shellfolk is actually a little interesting because only America is playing it. And I don't even mean like the Americas shard. I mean like the United States and Oceania. In that we're not seeing any of it in Europe, be it European grassroots events or European Fight Night. We are not seeing it in BR Fight Night. We're really only seeing it in NA Fight Night. And it's pretty popular in NA Fight Night and a couple of like the other NA tournaments. So Glorious Evolution Shellfolk like feels really good from where I'm sitting in the United States. And that might not be reflective of a global scale. It's difficult to find matchup charts on because it's not really getting played on ladder. So the info that I do have is skewed by players that are really big on this deck, but I am confident in the Shellfolk package, and I do think that Glorious Evolution is the superior finisher over something like Ezreal. So yeah, that's why Glorious Evolution Shellfolk is tier 1. Now, something that we might see here as a counter to like this very bread and butter kind of stale Gangplank Sivir Scion meta is Control. You know, Feel the Rush, Darkness, Spooky Viego, things like this. Because Spooky Viego, it doesn't have a lot of ladder data. The ladder data that I do have is like sub 50 games, so it's massive grain of salt type deal, but like it's good into like 2 of the 3 good decks and then just like garbage against everything else. But again, that's like an extremely small sample size, not necessarily indicative of the strength of Spooky Viego. And the people that are playing Spooky Viego, like Cameron Hanzo, for example, are just very fucking good at playing Spooky Viego. This isn't like a deck that you're really picking up unless you know how to play it very well and you enjoy just playing the Viego style of gameplay. Thralls is another like Cameron Hanzo deck that I just kind of like took off because like I don't think that it's necessarily tier 2 or tier 1. It might be like a little bit lower, like tier 3, where it's like, yes, I could see this winning a tournament, but it's not going to be popular. It's not going to like have a high win percentage if multiple people are entering with it. But I talked about it last week, so it felt weird to leave it in the leftover section. So like, if you just look at the tier list, the leftover section might look weird. It's more for like the actual Tournament Tactician video. So like maybe I'll rename this like Tournament Tactician Spotlight or something. So that it's like, you know, that this is just something that for people in the video, a deck that I wanted to talk about that I will then delete later. But that is what it is. So Feel the Rush is another deck that like does very well into Gangplank, because when we're looking at the top 3, Gangplank is really the only one that is currently popular enough for you to look to hard counter, and it's the only one that like has a archetypal weakness where like Plunder and Bandle Pirates have very different matchup charts into the other meta decks, but both of them don't do very well against Ruination or like a large amount of healing or like Shadow Isle decks in general. And I think that's where we're going to start to see a lot of control come in, is like trying to soft counter these Gangplank decks, and then it doesn't even really matter how good or bad your Sivir or Scion matchup is because you were just looking to beat the Gangplank decks. I don't know if anyone's going to bring that strategy this weekend. It's kind of why I've left FTR off the tier list, but I do think that like if you're looking for something spicy to just really shake things up, that's your go-to, right? Is to just play triple control and try to beat all the Gangplank players. And then Bandle City Swain. So this is a deck that might even be in the Tournament Tactician I want to talk about this section, but I left it in tier 2 because it actually has been performing very well. The Riven isn't... So initially we saw this as Swain Teemo, and then we saw a transformation into Swain Riven, and now it looks like most players have gone back to Swain Teemo, and that list has been performing very well, not only on ladder, but in other grassroots events. And I haven't really nailed this one down yet. I haven't been able to figure out if it's here to stay, if it's going to go. It's really just the combination of like Swain and Lecturing Yordle is very powerful, but the deck can struggle with actually leveling the Swain if you don't find enough copies of Ravenous Flock. But the thing that I like about it so much is that it's usually running 3 execute style abilities, so like you are getting absolutely full value out of the Lecturing Yordle. And overall, I think the deck is like very fun, very cool, very unique, and it's nice to see Swain still having a place in the meta. So I think that this is a deck that, like, you know, its matchup charts aren't great. It'll beat some of the meta decks and then do very poorly into some of the other ones. So this is one of those decks, like, you just kind of got to do a little bit of research into it if you want to bring it. But like, I do think it's a very fun deck. Curious to see if we are going back to Riven again, or if we're sticking with the Teemo, or if there's a different champion we want to try out. But Bandle City Swain does seem to have more staying power than a lot of the other Flash in the Pan decks. So I just kind of wanted to call that one out. You'll probably see it top cut something this weekend, because again, we have American and European tournaments happening, which you can sign up in the description below for either one of those, depending on the region that you live in. And yeah, that's really all I had. There was something that I wanted to put in the leftover section, a deck that I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to be honest with you. I don't remember what it is. And I don't really want to dig around to try and remember. So there's something that I wanted to talk about, but I don't know what it is, so we gonna skip it. But that is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. As always, my name is Boulevard. And again, those arcane cards dropping next week are going to shake things up. The seasonal is 3 weeks away, 2 weeks away, something along those lines. I think it's 3 weeks at this point. So yeah, the seasonal is 3 weeks away. The arcane cards drop tomorrow, or Wednesday. And then we will be able to play with those for about 2.5 weeks. So next Tournament Tactician will be pretty big because it'll be the initial release of Jace, getting that tier list sort of hot and ready. And then the next week is like, okay, here's the refinement of the Jace decks. And then, of course, comes the big Tournament Tactician of the pre-seasonal. So this is sort of the most irrelevant one that we've had in a while, that we're going to have for a while, because from here on out, we're full steam ahead. And then, of course, after the seasonal, we finally get a new influx of cards and a new expansion. So really looking forward to that. Anyway, that is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Boulevard, and as always, good luck in your tournaments.